What's up, bros? So this is episode 8 of the drift car build, and I have a lot to explain and not a lot of time to do it, so let's get started. So what we have to go over in this video. First thing is getting the camber the same from one side of the car to another. The second is to adjust the height and the same in the front of the car. Third is to get the wheel spacing correct all the way around. And then lastly is to get the height also adjusted the same in the back. So first off is adjusting the camber in the front. And I have a little diagram here that I'm going to show you about what I think happened to the car and which is why I need to compensate the camber in the front, not just a simple alignment. Here's my piece of paper, but basically these are wheels, obviously, and then these are the lower control arms, and then this is the coilover that's going to the shock tower of the car, and then these boxes, squares, are the frame, you know, in that little attachment. So this is how a good frame looks, right? So what I think happened is there was an impact on the bottom portion of my frame. Remember, I switched out the cross member, and it basically pushed over the whole bottom portion of the frame, like this. So the shock towers remain in place, but the bottom portion of the frame moves over. And so then what happens is it pulls the lower control arms over and on this side out, and when doing that, it basically caused a whole bunch of negative camber on this side, and yet on this side it pulled in the lower control arm, caused a whole bunch of positive camber. Obviously not as severe on the car, but this is basically the idea. So what I needed to do was get this side, you know, more on the positive side, although I was fine with more negative. But more importantly, I needed to get the passenger side more negative because it was getting nowhere near as negative as this side. So what I initially did to get the camber, you know, kind of situated in the front was get those adjustable front lower control arms, which I forgot which episode it's in, maybe episode 4. And as you saw, it broke the weld on that, so I didn't use that. And so then the next step was using camber bolts in order to get more negative on one side and bring the other side more positive, and that way it would, you know, equal out the damage. Well, I'm not really going to show you the camber bolt install and how to use them and everything like that, and the main reason for that is when I was installing the camber bolts, I found out that the top coilover bolt hole on my coilover bracket was slotted in order to get more negative camber already. And if you don't know what that means, I also have another paper diagram for you right here. Alright, so here's my little diagram. This is the tire, this is the knuckle, here's the coilover, and here's the bracket for the coilover. So traditionally, you know, the two holes in the knuckle bolt to the two holes on the coilover bracket. And they're supposed to be just two circles. So what you can do, and what manufacturers often come with on coilovers, is they elongate this hole. So that way, when you bolt up your knuckle and everything, you can go ahead and you can either keep it there, which should be more positive, or what you can do is tilt the wheel inward, right, and give it more negative camber. And by doing so, you would just have to move the knuckle inward and then just tighten the bolt all the way down here. So by doing that, you can get a whole bunch more negative camber. So rather than just having a standard hole, go ahead and slot the coilover, and then your knuckle can basically sink in a lot more. And then once it sinks in a lot more, you get more negative camber. So basically it does the same thing as essentially a camber bolt would do, or your top hats would do in adjusting, except it's right here on your coilover bracket. Here it is at 0 degrees camber. I push the wheel in, so that bolt loosen. Go into -2 right here. So I'm gonna tighten up, see what it gets with the -2 in, and if I don't get -4, even with the, you know, the top hat maxed out, then I'm gonna go ahead and slot it some more. But that's how it was just on the car already. I don't know if that came from factory, if the previous owner did it, but yeah, -2 degrees difference. So what I did is I just went full negative on the passenger side with the, you know, little camber, the slot in the coilover, and on the driver's side I just went full positive on that, and basically that, you know, compensated for the most part for the camber difference, and I was able to achieve my goal, which was -3.5 degrees of camber in the front. Next step was getting the height even in the front of the car, and this is how I went about that. So like I said, I'm over here trying to adjust the height of the coilover to make the car higher on this side because it's sitting about 3/4 of an inch lower. So basically like 1 finger distance. Okay, remember how I got the car and it had no sway bar attached on the passenger side? Okay, with the sway bar, the end link attached on this side. This is the knuckle, which, I mean, not all you guys will be able to understand this, but most of you should, I think. Basically, the sway bar keeps everything level. It's connected from one arm to the other arm. So basically, if that other arm is lower, then this arm is also going to be lower. It's going to keep everything the same height no matter what. So basically, with that sway bar connected, this car wants to sit a 1/2 inch lower than what it is right now, making it like 1 1/4 inch lower on this side. Okay, so now it makes sense why that guy removed the sway bar end link on this side, because if you have that sway bar end link connected, it makes it almost near impossible to bring the knuckle down all the way to here in order to compensate for the height and make it proper, all because the frame right there is basically butchered up complete. Like, what is, dude, you can stick your finger inside here, it's not really a good sign. You can see the buckle over here too. So essentially, because the frame is messed up in the front, it's pulling the sway bar up, and of course if the sway bar goes up, it pulls the arm up, and if the arm pulls up, it brings the wheel up, and then if the wheel is up, obviously it's slammed more, you know, higher up. So now I have the decision of either trying to force that sway bar in, I guarantee it's going to take at least half an hour, or I can just remove the sway bar end link and drive it like that and drive it at normal height. But okay, so I raise it on this side. It seems to match the other side as far as when I put on the wheel, and then I go ahead and then test the gap in between the fender and the tire. It seems even, maybe just a few millimeters off, but not that big of a deal. Now what I said about the sway bar is I basically could not get the car to go higher without the sway bar being taken off because of the buckle right here in the frame. Well, I went to Home Depot and I basically figured that all I needed to do was keep the sway bar in the same place, right, and just let the arm drop down. So I have there 6 washers, okay, 6 washers stacked in between the end link and the bushing in order to space out the arm. Basically, this pushes the arm down. So theoretically, or actually what it's supposed to be, is this arm, like the end of this, should be all the way up here. So that means that arm should be this much higher at this point. But instead, because of all these washers, it's pushed down. And then on the bottom here, it also had extra thread. So then, okay, so then what I did is just used all that extra thread and then was able to thread on the nut until the very point. It used to have, I think, a 1/2 inch of thread extra. Now it just has that much extra. And also, because the bushing squishes too, you can also go ahead and just tighten it way far down and get it able to squish. So technically, you could even run more washers, even though it doesn't even fit. You can just squish the bushing to get a safe amount of threads on this nut. So that's what it's looking like right now. I already tested the height. I'm just going to tighten down this collar over here, as well as you know, put the brake line back on, check all my bolts and everything, and then put it down and then compare the height. Well, that basically compensated for the height difference for the most part. It's still a little off, but I think it's pretty good considering what I had to work with. So for the most part, that is done, and the height is basically even in the front. So next step now was to compensate for the wheel spacing being off from one side of the car to another caused by the frame damage. And so in order to go about that, all I did was took a measuring tape and I just measured the difference from, you know, like the wheel to the edge of the fender on both sides, and then based on what I measured, I went ahead and ordered wheel spacers for that so I can go ahead and push out whichever wheel needed to be pushed out and get the wheel spacing looking correct. So I did my alignment, of course, and as you guys probably tell by now, the frame is a little messed up. Well, I don't think I've ever showed this, but here it is, okay? Notice how much poke is on that front driver's side and rear driver's side, okay? Notice that. Now, we're gonna go to the passenger side. Absolutely no poke. It's sunken in more than an inch. And in the back, remember the poke in the back on that side? But this front one is definitely messed up. There's no way the other side pokes and this one tucks over an inch. Yeah, so I'm gonna try and get some spacers now. I'm so happy that they're already here. I already got the car over there sitting. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put these on right now. Hopefully they fit and I did the right calculation. Otherwise all this excitement is gonna be turned around and be a whole bunch of disappointment. Yeah. Hub centric, 66.1 millimeters, has some little bit of rust on there. Might need to shave it down. See how it fits. Yeah, exactly what I said. Oh yeah. Type it. Oh, that fitment, bro. Oh my goodness. Check it out. Didn't even need to shave down the legs. Oh my goodness. And look at this baby. Oh my goodness. Beautiful. Beautiful. Oh my goodness. Now the car looks so much better. Not more better, retarded. So much better. Oh my goodness. Then I also thought that the frame was messed up in the rear of the car as well. And so I did the same thing as I did the front. I measured with measuring tape. I figured out the difference and I assumed 15 millimeter was what I needed. Ordered the spacer. I installed the spacer and everything like that. And then a while after doing that, I took off my wheels, which remember I bought those wheels at the junkyard, and I was cleaning them and everything. And I noticed something weird about, the amount of metal on the back of the wheels. And so I was like, it looked different on one of the wheels, so I figured that one must have a different offset. And dude, okay, right now you guys are probably gonna yell at me. Dude, I already yelled at myself, flipped out so hard for this, and some of you guys might already know what's coming. But I have no idea how this even passed me. I checked the wheel offsets in the junkyard. I checked them when I got home. I so many times. I can't even fathom how I missed this. But basically, one of the wheels out of a set of 4, okay, has a offset of positive 17. So basically that only one of the wheels is sunken in more than the others. And I didn't know this when I was buying the spacers. So basically I bought a 15 millimeter spacer when the Riken was actually a positive 17. So I should have ordered a 17 millimeter spacer. It's still just I can't even get over the fact that I missed that. It's such a facepalm, so hard. Such a can't even. Okay, you have to understand my struggle here. Okay, bro, you bashing hard in the comments. I can already see it coming because it's such a noob error. But so, anyways, the frame isn't actually messed up in the back. I'm still sticking with the 15 millimeter spacer that I bought, even though I need a 17 millimeter spacer. And the reason for that is just, this is a junkyard set of wheels, which are actually Rikens, but still, I'm not gonna go buy another set of spacers when I can just easier go buy better looking, better wheels for, the money and everything. So, that's that. They're matching pretty well. So with that whole fiasco over with, now it was time to set the ride height in the back, which is a pretty weird thing. Doing my usual thing, which is you know, like aligning my car every other day. But basically the right side of the car, which is this side over here, of course, this side for some reason wasn't getting any lower, and the left side of the car was always solid, like where it was. I liked the ride height on that side, so I always wanted to make the right side match the left side. But every time I took out the coilover and I spin it, you know, to lower it, I put it back in, and the coilover, like, I mean, obviously the coilover was lower, but the car wouldn't really get lower as much as I put the lower the coilover. So as you can see right here, okay, I have the two coilovers. This is the one on the right side of the car, which I kept lowering and it wouldn't lower the car. And this is the one on the left side, which I like the ride height of, which was lower than this. And as you can see here, with the tops of the coilovers, same level, there's about, I don't know, what is that, about a 1 inch difference in overall height. And yet when I put it in the car, this one still sits higher than this one. So the right side of the car is somehow still sitting higher than the left side, even though I just showed you guys that this right here is shorter. So I mean, I don't know if that has to do with the sag, because maybe these things have a lot of miles on them. So what ends up happening is the coilovers start sagging over time on the driver's side, making them lower, just because majority of the time you're driving by yourself, you know, loner status. So when you're by yourself, all the weight is always on the left side of the car, so usually the coils on the left side of the car start to sag more than the right side because of the weight difference. There's like, you know, 150 pounds or whatever difference in weight. This is my unit of measurement, is usually 2 fingers. See this, how there's a little bit of gap for the 2 fingers? You see how this one, there's like no gap, it's like, it's pretty tight. And that one was approximately 1 inch higher than that side, the coilover. So I mean, this is like some serious sag issue with the spring on the driver's side. So I'm probably gonna switch the coilovers and then see what happens. All right, so I just switched the sides of the coilovers to make sure, or to see whether it was the chassis that was the issue or the coilovers that were the issue. So right now, the chassis looks to be the issue, because if I would have just switched the coilovers, then that means that this side should have been low, and then that side should have been high, just like it was opposite when the coilovers were in the correct positions. So I swapped the coilovers, okay, and so when I swapped the coilovers, that means that the height should have swapped too, but it didn't. Instead, this side is sitting higher, and then of course this side is sitting even lower, which makes sense because the shock that used to be over there was lower and the shock that used to be over here was higher. So now when it comes over here, this one goes insanely low and the outside goes insanely high. So what I'm going to do now is take out the coilovers one more time, put them back over here. I still have to keep lowering one of them so I can get it to my ride height, because basically it's the chassis that's messing up, not the coilover, so I know that now. And then once I go ahead and put that one in, get the height adjusted, I also figured out how much I can thread out my rear upper control arms. So now that I know how much I can thread out my rear upper control arms, I know what's wrong with the chassis. I can basically dial in the rear end, hopefully for you know, like one of the last times, now that I have like level ground and everything to do it on. All right, so that's it. So switching the coilovers, then gonna do a little alignment. All right, so this is what I'm dealing with now. There's about 1.5 inches of difference from one coilover to another. So that one's gonna go on the right side of the car, which the chassis just sits higher on that side. This one's gonna go on the left side of the car, which the chassis, I don't know, it's either normal or it sits lower than it should. And yep. All right, so the height is now finally fixed. About 1.5 inches lower on this side. Got a little tight 2-finger gap. So what I'm gonna do now is change the wheels to my drift set, which are Steelies, and that's just so I can get a proper alignment, because these wheels right here are pretty curved. So here we are. Got the steelies on. I already jumped in the trunk a couple times, settled the suspension, so now we're gonna do the alignment. Now I already dialed in the gauge at 0 on the ground and leveled it. And now as you can see here, it's at -2. You know, it's pretty accurately on -2 as well. And that's what I last set it on. So I know that the gauge is accurate, the wheel is accurate, and that my settings didn't change at all. So now I'm gonna go ahead and then loosen up the rucka, or the rear upper control arm. And then lengthen that out, and then when you lengthen that out, it'll of course bring the top out. Once you bring the top out, it'll be less negative camber. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'm gonna set it. Minimum I wanna get is -1, and the maximum would be like -0.5, so, yeah. Bam, just like that. Got a 1/2 degree of negative camber. Beautiful. And just like that, this one is also at -0.5 degrees. And then with that out of the way, my ride height was pretty solid in the rear as far as similarity wise, and so I went ahead and dialed out my camber to -0.5 degree. Yeah. So in conclusion, I have -3.5 degrees of camber in the front, utilizing the coilover bracket. I then have a 30mm wheel spacer in the front in order to compensate for frame damage. I also have adjusted the front height of the car using washers on the sway bar end link, also on the passenger side. Moving on to the rear, I adjusted each coilover separately in order to get even ride height. I then threaded out my rear upper control arms in order to get -0.5 degree of camber. And then, of course, I went ahead and bought 15mm spacers in order to compensate for a wheel, which was +17. But of course, I found out after that. I found that out after I had bought the Rikens. Well, in conclusion to the conclusion, it's not perfect, but I think it's pretty good considering what I started out with. Also, I'll probably end up adjusting the height again like a month from now. That's just the way I am. So, alright, so if you like this video, you can go ahead and give it a like. If you have any questions or anything like that, you can go ahead and leave me a comment, and I'll try and respond within 24 hours, of course, if there are questions. Also, if you want to stay tuned on all these updates and everything like that, you can go ahead and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you guys in episode 9. Oh, and by the way, it's going to be wrapping up pretty soon. Then you'll see some track footage. Okay. 3 minutes, 35 seconds to adjust camber. Yep. Takes longer just driving to alignment shop.